So thank you for joining us for the second Ask Us Anything video that we've put together from the Trust. We put questions out on all the social media platforms that we could think of. Almost all of the questions came from Twitter this time. So we're going to do our best to answer the questions that came through. Thank you for sending them in, and we'll do this again, particularly if it's helpful for people. Just to introduce ourselves, so I am Jaimie Henderson. I'm co-chair of the Robins Trust.
I'm Sam Nair, the other co-chair of the Robins Trust.
I'm Jenny Hancock, and I'm on the board of the Robins Trust.
And Dave Beesley, the Robins Trust appointed director to the club board.
Okay, and between the four of us, we're going to try and tackle the questions that came in. Some of them were more for Mike Garlick, and we're going to meet with Mike Garlick in the near future, and we will pass them on and try and get his thoughts on these questions as well. But we'll try to answer ones we're able to. I think the first one we had was from Dan on Twitter, which was about when will we expect a 1, 2 or 5 year plan on where the club will be going.
You know, the club board's thoughts on having a medium to long-term plan have been discussed before, so we don't want to go over that. And you'll remember the Trust presented the Building for the Future document that I think was sort of really valued among members, and we saw a big boost. So as Jamie said, we're speaking to Mike Garlick shortly, and we see Building for the Future as being sort of a really good starting point for developing a plan. Mike talked about evolution, not revolution. So when we're introducing Building to the Future to him, we'll sort of endeavour to make sure that plan happens, and that we'll keep you updated on this. But it is early days. Mike's only been around for sort of 10 days, still, I'm sure, learning the ropes and getting to know everything. So watch this space, hopefully.
Okay, the next question we have is, what have the Robins Trust got to say on recent matters? You represent the fans, including myself, as a paid-up member. But where's the view on the director of football, the view on no kit man? Were you aware? No goalkeeping coach. Where's our voice? So I think this may link into a couple of the questions that we've got to come down the line as well. But I think questions about whether we're aware of the situation at the club, I think that's a good point at which to talk to people about how we work as a trust. And obviously we do have Robins Trust appointed director. And Dave, you do feed things back to us and keep us aware of what's going on in the club. I mean, we do, we'll say this time and again, we own 15% of the club. I know Mike Garlick has come in as the major owner, but we are an owner of that business. So yeah, we are kept aware of what's happening. Linking to that, we are owners of a business. So we represent our members. We're democratic elected. Anyone from the trust can stand to be on the board.
But I wonder whether it's not for the trust necessary to speak about footballing matters. I'm sure on the trust board we all have our own opinions on players and managers, and as do fans. Football is a game of opinions, so it's hard for us to make one unified stance on club staff.
Sorry, I'm also unsure where this no goalkeeping coach point has come up, because I've seen it a couple of times on social media now. Joe Day is our goalkeeping coach. Now, we are probably in the odd situation that we have him also being our first choice goalkeeper as a player. But he is coaching Mamadou along with the academy goalkeeping coach. So we do have goalkeeping coaches.
That I think people are saying he's a full-time goalkeeper. He can't be a goalkeeper coach, but player coach is not a particularly unusual thing in football, I don't think. This is a question from Dan Hart on Twitter, who says, I and many others pay a voluntary monthly amount to be a trust member. Thank you for that, Dan, and everyone else who does. The purpose of this previously was to increase trust shareholding in the club. Now we have a single majority shareholder. Has the opportunity reduced? If so, what will that money be used for? So this is one that I had responded by email to the other person who asked it. And I think this comes down again to, we've got to speak to Mike Garlick and work out exactly what that opportunity is and how it remains. We want to continue to invest in the club and to continue to at the very least maintain our shareholding, because as soon as Mike Garlick starts paying for some of the bigger infrastructure things, we will get diluted. And I think it's a really good opportunity for us to be more ambitious as a trust and to look at a lot of the bigger things we can get involved in. But we need to sit down with Mike Garlick. As I say, we're meeting in the very near future, and to talk about that and to work out how that would work.
Yeah, but I think I'd add to that, Jaimie, as you say, we're really keen to keep investing and acquiring shares if possible, and like you say, to make a real difference in partnership with Mike, I guess we need to up our game in terms of number of members, the amount of fundraising we're doing, or even looking at sort of new and different ways of raising finance to help support some of that infrastructure investment. That's not to diminish what we've done in the past. I know Jenny and others have done a great job to help buy and install things like the bike rack. We use members' funds to help contribute to the share purchase and Paul Baker, which made a huge difference. But if we want to really use this as an opportunity to grow the trust and our influence and keep our shareholding, then we want to do more. To say that when it comes to the shareholding, we're really want to pull our weight to match the investment from Mike Garlick and what he makes to keep it at 15%. And that can be done. Other clubs have shown a precedent for that. AFC Wimbledon, for example, have worked on fundraising. We'd have to sort of raise 20p for every £1 that Mike Garlick spends, for example, and we'll be working on ambitious plans to do that.
Yep,
Anything you want to say on that point, Dave, from experiences from other clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I met with someone who's been involved with Wimbledon and that kind of scheme. They've gone through the fans bond to build Plough Lane. He gave us some great information on that, on how it would be run. Also have contacts with the external companies who've run fundraising rounds for fan involvement in projects like this. It's not out of the question that we could raise high six, maybe even seven figures in a one-off hit for a project like this through means other than just memberships and things. And that's how I envisage it working. If Mike's going to put together a project to, say, overhaul the training ground, we'd be minor partners in that. Or if it's to build the main stand, maybe we'd say, well, you take the main stand, we'll take the home end, and split them out into projects that we can do. It's something that, with the right impetus and the right drive behind it, and the fact that it can be achievable, we can certainly throw ourselves into that.
On to the next question, which does roll in other questions we had about the role of the Robins Trust appointed director, as we refer to it, formerly the fan elected director, and also about views on certain members of the non-playing staff. I suppose I could extend to the playing staff if people wanted to broaden the question out. So there's some of the other questions that we're going to condense into these two, which is what is the view that the fan elected director is putting across, which is why I think the Robins Trust should be putting out some sort of poll to its members, i.e., do you, as a paid member of the trust, have confidence in Gary Johnson's example here, and then take those results to the boardroom. And then Matt Ads on Twitter asked very similarly, can you send out a poll to all members of the trust asking if they have confidence in our director of football? Quite a simple thing to do, I'd have thought. If the result of such a poll is no, then we take that to the board, express our concerns. Can the above happen?
I think the structure of the trust is such that the fans are represented in these points of view through me, and I do put a broad church of opinion across in these meetings. Your views aren't going unheard, but I think it would be improper to run any kind of poll on someone's employment status. I wouldn't want that done for myself at my place of work. It's just not proper.
I mean, this is something to stress, isn't it, Dave? Sorry to dive in there, but we are owners of a business. We're running a business. We're essentially a cooperative as a supporters trust. Now, we could be a cooperative that took over the local pub in our town and we're running that because this seemed to be a model that worked and it was a way of, having some equity in it. People wouldn't necessarily then expect that we would have public votes on whether the head chef should continue to be employed or not. I mean, I know football's a funny business, but it is a business and we are owners of a business. So I think while everyone is entitled to their point of view and to express it how they want, I just don't know that it would be appropriate for the trust to be having a poll on that, on someone's employment, no matter what, everyone's feelings are about how it's going.
I think I'd as well, even though in position of co-chair on the trust, I don't know the criteria by which the club appointed Gary Johnson or how they measure successful things which are happening business-wise behind the scenes, which we're not party to. So even though I may have feelings, and like many fans have feelings, I wouldn't feel comfortable making an emotional decision, or emotional is the wrong word, making a decision based on just what I read in the newspaper and see on the pitch without knowing what else is happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm on a board of 6 board members as it is now. My role is to represent the fans' point of view as much as I can, take my own personal emotion out of it.
One thing with this, I would say, is that particularly where we put this question up, there's obviously a lot of people who are part of that sort of group of people commenting who have a very shared idea about what they think should happen and about how they feel. But the trust has to tread a very fine line about this, because for all that we get people on social media saying we never do anything, we're yes men, we just do whatever the board wants, or whatever we're told to do, whenever we call out things that we don't think are right, and this is not an excuse to not do that, but we then will get, and it's particularly by email, lots of people getting in touch with us saying, I'm thinking about giving up my trust membership. Your role is to be supportive of the board and be supportive of our club, and it's not to sow this division. And it's, it's a broad church, the trust, and we're trying to reflect a lot of different viewpoints. So I think it's worth saying that. I mean, because social media allows you to see people's opinions, and an email means that it just comes to us. It doesn't mean that there is a really strong consensus necessarily that we're picking up on. And that goes for almost all the issues that people get annoyed at the trust about. There are always other opinions available.
It's often the case. Exactly what you say. I've seen emails where we've gone out and we've gone hard on the club when we feel they've made a mistake, and we have received those emails saying, that's not your job. Your job is to support the club. Your job is to put money into the club and grow it, not slag it off, for want of a better phrase. And I don't feel we slag the club off. I feel we are what the FSA referred to as a critical friend, and that's both meanings of the word critical. We are there when the club is in need, and we are there to put our arm around our mate and say, maybe you're not doing the right thing sometimes. And I think we try and get that balance correct. And it's not always seen, especially on board matters, because sometimes they have to be kept within the boardroom. I may feed some back to Jaimie and Sam when I feel that I either need a sanity check or it's something that might catch them by surprise if it gets leaked. But on the whole, there has to be a level of professionalism.
So this question is from Michael on Twitter, who asks, how many weeks has the manager been washing the kit? I'm asking because if it's just a stopgap measure because Kitman stepped down, was let go, whatever, it's hardly on the same scale as say all managers have had to wash kit since we've been a league club. So I think getting there, the idea that it does the manager as a standard arrangement wash the club kit, and it's only a tweet from a local journalist that has blown the lid on this whole thing. Dave, I'm going to have to come to you again about this because we've had a bit of a discussion about this one.
Yeah, the club on the whole employs a full-time kit person. Their role isn't just washing kit. There's a lot more to it than that, ensuring we hold the correct inventory, ensuring all the kit is arranged for various phases of training, ensuring it's ready to be taken to an away game, which can often be several hours driving in a van. We have a full-time member of staff for that on the whole, but we had a period where we didn't, and the club put in place interim arrangements, which included some of the coaching staff from the academy who wash the academy kit and prepare the academy kit, so they've got that level of experience. Gary Johnson also arranged for a member of staff to come up from Bristol City on a short-term basis, on a part-time basis. And there have been occasions where neither of those options were available, so therefore the coaching staff as a whole have mucked in and got it done. It's not a case that the manager's been washing the kit all summer. It's not a case that the manager always has to wash the kit all year round. It's an exceptional circumstance. It might not even be that Michael himself has been washing the kit. It's the coaching staff have had to get involved 1 or 2 days during pre-season, maybe. And it's just, it's been posted online without a bit of context as a single statement, and it's ran from there, I'm afraid.
I think this is one of those things as well that we talked about, the kind of context around it in a very general sense, obviously. And it does feel like this is something where the club have done things very correctly and by the book, and they kind of have done well in what was a difficult situation here and arranging that cover. And it's just very unfortunate that, you know, a comment was made about it when people's backs were up about a lot of other things. So
yeah, we've had similar situations in the past. When Tim, our previous ticket office manager, left us, it was a lot more difficult to replace him than we envisaged. We had Mal in on an interim basis, and he's shown himself to be excellent. So sometimes you can find your next member of staff for a role out of those situations. So I think the club have done the right things here. It's just been put across to the fans in the wrong context.
Mike on Twitter again has asked, can we add to the list of things for Mike Garlick to do to fix the PA system in the Colin Farmer? Paul Baker personally promised me he would address this when I had corporate hospitality a number of years ago. I think this has been an ongoing issue, hasn't it? For quite some time, as Michael points out. I think we're going to bring this up with Mike Garlick or with the club as a whole as well. I mean, it's just, this is something that just should be fixed. So, yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing our attention to it. I don't know if there's much more to say on that.
Other than in the whole conversation with Mike around building for the future, to refer back to that, these are exactly the type of things we sort of identified might need to happen in the short term part of the plan, and then building on that once the match day experience is improved.
I have another one from Michael on Twitter, which I think is quite a quick one to answer, because Michael has asked, why have the red and white members been dealt with so shabbily in recent years? Probably more of a question for the SLO, and I would say, Michael, that is a question for the SLO and the club. If you want to send us a bit more information about that to info@robinstrust.org, we can look into it and try and find out what's going on. But I don't know what the experience is of the red and white members.
Funnily enough, Jaimie, I don't know if it was Michael who I spoke to last year, but I sampled the pie a pint in the club bar, town, whatever that lounge is called, and there was a table in there which the referees and the assistant referees were using, which was meant to be the designated red and white members table, and they used to have certain privileges of sort of getting team cheese programs, hot drinks, but the referees and assistant managers have been invited to use the table and sort of left all their empty glasses and things on there, and apparently the service the red and white members received in that lounge wasn't how it used to be before. It was the offering was changed. I don't know if that's what Michael's referring to. That's just what people were complaining about on the day I was there.
That's interesting to know. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll have a look into that on Michael and the rest of the red and white members' behalf if you send us some more information about it.
Absolutely.
This is quite a good one. I like this question, but I think we're all going to end up with the same answer. So this is David Jordan on Twitter again, I believe, has asked, if you could click your fingers and the new ownership would instantly change one thing about the club, what would it be? One thing only. Although there's 4 of us, so it could be 4 things.
Yeah, from my point of view, and it's something I've been putting forward to the board repeatedly, is that I think for the club to take its next step, there needs to be a full-time business leader in the building. I think Jaimie did a study a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, where he went through every single club website directory and documents on the FA website, and he came to the conclusion that out of the 92 clubs in the Premier League and Football League, only 2 at the time didn't have a full-time leader, either a CEO, an MD, that kind of thing.
I think it was 3, but that was including us, so maybe only 2 others. Yeah.
So my perception was it was us, and at the time Wigan, but Wigan had the excuse of the fact they were in administration, and therefore the administrators were crisis managing the club.
Yeah, I do think, sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but I do think that the other one, not Wigan, I can't remember who it was, but again, there was a reason for it. It was to do with some personnel changes or something. It wasn't a decision that had been made.
So one was between CEOs, one was in administration and therefore being run by a group of administrators, and then there was us, we have had a CEO in the past, and the response I do sometimes get is it's not worked for us in the past. It's an expense we can't spare on the current budgeting. I've always tried to make the point that a CEO, if they're right for the role, will pay their own salary in time, either in cost savings or in financial uplift. And I just don't feel a £5 million turnover, which I'm not revealing any trade secrets here. It's all in Companies House. A £5 million turnover a year business shouldn't be being run by a committee. It should be being run by a full-time business leader taking direction from the directors.
I think in our Building for the Future document, the Trust made it quite clear that we felt that the day-to-day operations needed some kind of looking at to see if it could be made more efficient. And I don't think we've changed our minds as a Trust on that at all. And I think we probably all agree that that is the most important thing. If we were to wave a magic wand, that's what we'd all want, is to have a look at the strategic operations of the club and see how they could be improved on. And I think, as Dave said, that is an operations manager of a high level from the outside.
I mean, I think with the one thing, and I'm sure, well, we'll talk to Mike Garlick about this, but, I would hope that he is planning to do a strategic review along the lines of what we had proposed, and we had lined up some excellent people to take last year, and it was decided that for we've had this discussion publicly, for what was essentially a pittance, it was not taken up. And I think we can, I know we were in a particular situation then, we're not in that situation now, so I hope that one way or another that review of all our operations, top to bottom, is going to be undertaken.
And Burnley did have a CEO under Mike's stewardship. It didn't initially, but it did. And I think the gentleman who did that role is now at MK Dons. So it's not something that's out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing more for me to add to that, really. I was trying to go through my head of all the little things which I'd like to change. I don't know, like nicer coffee, better advertising in town, that type of thing. And I think that a business leader in place or reviewing the offer and what could be improved in the way the club run, both behind the scenes and on match day, is the answer. So.
One thing I would change, and I'm going to bring this up again, is that the kit and all the kit, training kit and the shirts, should have the words Cheltenham Town FC. I might even go for AFC, but that might just be me, written underneath the badge, because I do not think that the brand is strong enough for it to be recognised. And that means that there may be people in Gloucestershire who someone could walk past in a shirt and they just wouldn't notice what it is, or suddenly go, there's a football club in Cheltenham. But anyway, that's just me. I'll put it to a vote one day.
Don't get started on whether we should move away from area then, Jaimie. That would be the other big decision, which I'm sure many would like to see. But...
I mean, I don't know whether this will make the cut for the final bit, but my understanding is that it's the outgoing or the now outgone director who had that close relationship with area, that maybe that will change. And I'm not saying that that was just a cozy arrangement, but I find it hard to believe that sticking with the same kit supplier for 27 years now is right, just from the fact that I'm told to change my electricity provider and various other things. I shouldn't leave my ISA in the account I've got it in, and things like that. It just seems that it can't be the best deal to just stay with the same company. But there we go. Lots of change afoot, I'm sure. So Gab Sutton got in touch on Twitter as well and said, do you get the impression Mike Garlick is going to be front-footed in addressing some of these internal question marks, or take a bit of time to take stock? Again, we're going to talk to Mike Garlick about that. I'm sorry to sort of deflect with that. That's not something to hide behind, but we want to get an idea about that as well, and to understand how he wants to work. So I think that's something we will answer in future. Dave, I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think it, from my impressions of him so far, having met him a few times, it's a bit of both. I think he said in his statement, which Sam alluded to earlier, evolution, not revolution. So there will be a period, like any new business leader, there'll be a period where he would probably like to take stock and see what he's working with. But he has also stepped in the last 10 days and ensured that we've made reinforcements in the transfer window to make sure that we've got a competitive squad on the pitch. And I think that bore fruit this weekend with the 1-0 win and the goal scorer who scored it. It's a mixture of both. I'm sure if something became incredibly urgent, he would step in and be front-footed, but I think he'd prefer to take time and see what he's working with so that we don't overreact.
Okay, we had a couple of questions about the same issue. I think they're from two different people, not the same person asking the same question. And this is something that the trust has quite strong feelings about. So this is the subject of communication from the club. So we have been asked by Kevin on Twitter if we can relay to Mike Garlick that through the summer there was no communication to the fan base. The club only seemed to communicate when they tried to sell season tickets. There were no interviews with new incoming players. And Kevin suggesting that it's that they only communicate when they want the punters' money. And another question saying, can the trust and trust board member please urge the new owner and chairman to send out comms to explain what's going on behind the scenes at the club? I think we have previously published open statements on this. We spoke to the board about it last summer, and it was agreed that communication would improve. As it was also agreed that each of the points in the Building to the Future document that were apparently already being addressed would be responded to. And that hasn't happened. Now, I know that the club has been sold, and that was a very involved process. And the club, David Bloxham, Paul Godfrey would meet with us and keep us up to speed with what was going on there. But that was, later in the year. That didn't mean that everything else had to stand still. So I know, Dave, that you have asked them as a board member if they can improve that. But we want the club to communicate better, because we know it's not only an ongoing issue, but it causes issues. It is the kind of information vacuum that allows everything to really fly out of control. And then when someone does come along and tells us what's been going on, it's suddenly all a lot more understandable. And you realize, okay, so that's why X, Y, and Z.
I think Dave's point around his answer about the kitman situation and the washing of the kit and all of that activity was an example of where the lack of communication sort of opened the door for the points which were made on social media and the fans' response to that. But there's all sorts of communication, isn't there? And I think as a trust, we see other clubs communicating sort of from the marketing perspective of games. So the interviews of players, managers, snippets from the training room, all of those things. There's communicating to sort of the existing fans. I found myself of poor sales communication this summer. I got 4 phone calls from Gloucestershire County Cricket Club asking me if I wanted to renew my membership before the early bird deadline. Didn't receive one this year from the football club. In the past I remember when Mark Yates called me up when I was on the train to see if I wanted to renew my season ticket when he was manager. This time not the case, and I missed the fact that I'm sure the early bird deadline or the reservation deadline had changed, so I ended up losing my seat, which I've had since the Colin Farmer was built. I didn't renew it in time, so.
Oh, I didn't know that, Sam.
Yeah, so I was a little bit frustrated, and partly my fault, but it shows where a little bit of proactive communication to fans and seems like holders can help as well. Cool.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone else had anything about this. I mean, Jenny, you've sort of spoken to the club a lot about the fan engagement plan and things like that. So hopefully there's a broader cultural shift that's going to be coming in that direction anyway.
I do hear quite a lot that some of the problem with communication is manpower and time. And if that's the reason, then somebody needs to look at that, because it's not a good business model if you're not communicating because manpower and time are short. I don't know whether you can put that in or not, but that
No, I think we definitely can, because I think that's
I've been told,
an open
without
secret.
naming who's told me, but it is basically they haven't got enough staff.
With the new ownership and stuff, there's a bit more direction and just a bit more coherent planning and sort of strategy with the communications. So hopefully that will bear fruit. It is just this thing. I know we keep going back to the same point, but that it's a club run with a very small staff. But we are, you get to a point where, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to get the strategic review done last summer. You can't keep falling back on that without addressing it. You need to work out how you increase the capacity then. And, sometimes you need to think smarter if you can't increase the pot of money that you've got, or work out ways to increase that pot of money.
One question is to throw back at members on the communications point, because it's a big concern for everyone. If we're to help the club improve their communications, it'd be great to hear what members are interested in seeing, and fans sort of who attend games and don't attend games. When we're talking about communication, what type of stuff is it which would engage you in the club, or you think would help people engage in the club?
Right, I think we're on to the last couple of questions here. So one of them is, the talk of the town at the moment, which is, can the trust and the trust board member please explain to the supporters why our local journalist has stated that some of the things going on at Cheltenham Town really should not be happening at a professional football club. That was from Stuart on Twitter, obviously referencing the tweet from Jon Palmer.
And I suppose it's something I'd perhaps appreciate more meat on the bones, so to speak, as well. We've alluded to in a lot of answers to our questions in this video today that there are issues that we think need addressing. We've addressed that in our Building for the Future document as well. And now let me preface this with the fact I've got a good amount of respect for Jon. He's a good journalist. These are out of character for Jon. Jon normally follows these up with a story or as part of a thread. It's not like Jon to be putting out these single statements that hold no real water, and they just open people up to speculate. And I think that's what's happened here, is that the statement that Stuart's highlighted there, and the other one about the Michael Flynn washing the kit, they've both just been put out there without any context, and it's led to a lot of confusion. And the club needs to take their own part in that, and the fact they haven't then corrected it. This, I think, the term I've heard used recently, a desert of communication. The other saying is, noise fills a vacuum. There's nothing coming from the club to correct any of this stuff or to that kind of thing. But I'd want to hear from Jon, and my email address is open if he wants to arrange a call to talk about the issues that he's seeing, because it would be good if I could take them to the club board and deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add, I think as Jenny and Jaimie and Dave have all mentioned multiple times in building for the future, the first sort of call to action from us was professionalising the club. So whilst we have been calling ourselves on for the club to be more professional for quite a few years now, on this specific point, I don't know what that's referring to. But if Dave doesn't, I don't think anyone in the trust will.
Well, yeah.
I think we've covered some of it here, but I think we've covered some of it here. It would be nice to have that in writing, even if he doesn't want to put it on the Echo and put it out there to the world. If he wants to contact me, and we could start looking at dealing with what he's alluding to and see if we can start fixing things if there are problems.
Thank you both for that. So going on to our final question. This is a question that's in a few pieces, so I'm going to break it up slightly. It's about the shadow board. It's an email we had from Adam asking, when will the shadow board be meeting? How often, and how will they pass back a record of discussions to fans after each meeting? Followed up with a little bit, slight turn in Adam's question. Also, why is it mostly trust members, and why do 1887 have a seat when they are protesting against club staff? So that might be slightly perishable in news terms as a question, but I think it's an interesting question. Jenny, I think maybe if you want to tackle that first bit first. So when will the shadow board be meeting? How often, and how will they pass back?
Okay, so the shadow board, as you all know, have been elected over the period of the summer, and that's taken quite a long time, the whole process. There is some shadow board training set up very soon in the next couple of weeks, where all the shadow board members will undertake training, which is being delivered by the Football Supporters Association, who have got a lot of experience of setting up shadow boards. Once that training's taken place, and all the shadow board members have been put in touch with each other already, but this will be a great opportunity for them all to meet face to face and really get to know each other. It's then hoped that they can set up their first meeting with the club around about October time. That's kind of being quite realistic, I think. And they will meet at least 3 times a year. So there are terms of reference in place, and the club are committed to meeting with the shadow board at least as a minimum 3 times a year. So hopefully that answers the first bit of the question. In terms of how will they feed back to fans, so the shadow board members are really expected to seek feedback from fans initially when they're setting their agenda to meet the club. So they will use whatever platforms they choose to use to seek feedback from fans and opinions from fans. There should be a shadow board email set up by the time the training takes place. And then it's up to them how they choose to respond to fans to inform them about what's happened at the meetings when they brought those issues up. But the minutes of the meetings will be published on the club website in a timely fashion after each meeting. So fans should feel informed as to what's happening with the shadow board and their meetings with the club.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the bit about, why is it mostly trust members? And I've seen this a couple of other places. It's not mostly trust members. It's a 12-person board, and half of that is elected, and half of that is from representative fan groups.
So again, again, there was a working party in place to set up the shadow board, which I was part of, not as a trust member, but almost as an independent. So there was a club representative, myself, 2 representatives from the Football Supporters Association, because as I said, they've helped other clubs to set up shadow boards. So we took our guidance from them, really. It was decided that the 12 places on the shadow board, 6 of them would be from recognisable fan groups. So the Robins Trust is a recognisable fan group. We were allocated 3 places. Proud Robins is a recognisable fan group, as is 1887 and her game too. And I think what's really important is that a whole diversity of fans need to be represented on this board. So it can't just be, one organisation that's on the board. And it's really important for her game too, Proud Robins and 1887 to have those places on the board. So the other 6 places were elected from the fan base. There was a very clear election policy in place. Anyone could apply. The shortlisting for interview was done by the FSA representatives. And then once they'd been interviewed, they went to the election process and fans had the opportunity to vote for who they wanted on the shadow board. So it's a very democratic process. So the Robins Trust have actually got a quarter of the seats on the shadow board. And I think Robins Trust members will probably rotate who attends those seats. So that's why they've been allocated to those groups. I think at the training, it will be made very clear. Well, I know at the training, it will be made very clear to all shadow board members what conduct is expected from them as a shadow board member, what social media conduct is expected from them, and what happens if that's not adhered to. There is a disciplinary policy that will be in place, and any member of the shadow board who doesn't adhere to those policies is at risk of losing their place on the shadow board via the disciplinary procedure. And that isn't necessarily their personal place on the board, it is the place of the organisation they're representing. Mm-hmm. So I think it will all be made very clear at the shadow board training.
Who would make that decision? Is it the FSA or the club? Or?
So in the shadow board disciplinary policy, so the policies are all there in place, ready to be agreed by the shadow board and signed off at the training. So there is a disciplinary policy which states who would be on the disciplinary panel should anyone be brought up before the disciplinary committee. The FSA would be very happy to be involved in that because their intention is to support shadow boards ongoing into the future. This is something new. Shadow board members are going to come across things they're not quite sure how to deal with or what to do. They've got that support network from the FSA that they can contact, and they would certainly help if there were any disciplinary issues that needed to be addressed.
Have the club confirmed who will be attending from the club board of directors?
It can be any of them, Jaimie. So they can send all the directors to a meeting if they want to. There is a fan engagement lead at the club, who I believe is Paul Godfrey. He's the named fan engagement lead at the club. But they can send as many of the senior management to the shadow board meetings as they want to. And it might be, because I think the agendas are expected to be published in advance of the meeting, it may be that it's more appropriate for a certain member of staff to attend a certain meeting because they're going to discuss something that's pertinent to them. So I think each meeting will be different. But a senior official from the club has got to attend each meeting one. But as I say, as many as they want to attend can.
And I think I'm right to speak for all of us to say that, Dave, you wouldn't be attending either in the club capacity or the trust capacity to avoid any uncertainty in that regard.
Yes, to an extent. I don't think we'd rule it out, me attending, in terms of if it is a directly, fan engagement issue that we need to talk about. But I think the main crux of the matter is I can't be the sole club representative that goes. That would just negate the point.
Well, hopefully they are about to engage with it in the spirit in which it is intended, and it will be a very successful thing to have in our club, and it will facilitate communication and the decision making. So I think it's reasons to be optimistic. I know the spirit of the question was not as generous as it might have been.
I think also we've recently, as a trust, published on our website the difference between how the trust operate or the purpose of the trust and the purpose of the shadow board. So it's very much worth having a look at that, because the shadow board isn't instead of the trust; it's in harmony with the trust. But each have got our own perspectives on how we're going to work and operate.
Well, I'm
Thank you
sure
for
Jaimie
flagging
will put
that,
the link in the
Beast.
comments below.
I will indeed. Yes. Yeah.
And likewise, it's not in place of the Robbins Trust appointed director position either.
No.
In fact, just to bore people a little bit with the minutiae, it kind of grew out of evidence that myself and my colleague at Grimsby gave to the committee that were researching for what is now the Football Governance Act, and both of us gave evidence about how it can be a lonely role, and that you're stuck between two sometimes opposing views and opposing groups of thought. And I think that changed Dame Tracy Crouch's opinion at the time as to what the solution would be. At first, they thought it was to mandate an FED or an appointed director at every club, and then they decided actually it's more. It needs to be more people and more representative than that, not just one person.
This is another way that fans can have a voice. So fans have got the Robbins Trust, and they've got the trust appointed director, and they've got the shadow board. So support the trust, support the board. It's all for the good of fan engagement.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to the three of you for joining to try and answer the questions, and thank you to everyone who sent the questions in. If there are more questions, send them through to us on social media or at info@robinstrust.org, and we may well do one of these again. But I will just direct people to the Robbins Trust website. If you're not a member and you're interested in what we do, go and check it out, robinstrust.org, and come and join up if it's something you're interested in. And we got a new era has begun with Mike Garlick's ownership, and I think there's really interesting things that we can do as a trust and really grow what we're doing and the ambition that we have. So the more people that are involved, the better for that. We'll put the links below this. Hi there, this is Jaimie. It's just me this time. Jon, Paul and George have left the stage. It's time for Ringo to sing a song. We recorded the first bit 3 days ago. So you'll notice it's a different time of day to the previous bit. This is just a little extra bit because we spoke to Mike Garlick on Wednesday, Sam Nair, Dave Beesley and I. So some of the questions were really aimed maybe more to Mike. So I just wanted to give an update on those ones, the ones that we couldn't really answer in that first bit. This should be quite a short bit, so I'll see what I can do. Just as an overview, so we met Mike on the 10th of September, and he came across as incredibly approachable, very calm and considered. He just seems really interested in seeing what he can do for the club, and with the club, he sees a project there. Regarding plans and priorities, the immediate priority is to secure our status as an EFL club this season. So he arrived 9 days before the end of the transfer window, and I think, I feel certainly that the squad has been strengthened by some of those arrivals at the end. We've just got a deeper squad, and I think it's giving us a better chance at this point, injuries permitting and whatnot. So the takeover took a bit longer than expected. That wasn't due to any issues with the club or with Mike Garlick. It was just the final stage of approval took longer than it reasonably should have, I think it would be fair to say. And I believe David Bloxham did allude to that in one of the updates over the summer. This is already in the public domain, so I think I can say that Mike Garlick is recovering from an operation. That's certainly not my place to share any information about that kind of private matter, but the knock-on effect is that he has not been able to drive. He's been relying on other people, including Alison, to get him around. He lives in Hertfordshire, so he's not been able to get over to Cheltenham as easily as it will be once he's back behind the wheel. So I think a lot of these things have contributed to what's been going on in the current atmosphere. So from our chat, it was clear to us that Mike is going to have a look at every aspect of the club. He was asking us really interesting questions about the Cheltenham Town Community Trust, obviously separate from the Robbins Trust, and the work that the club does in schools and in the local community. And I think he's just interested in getting his head around everything as it stands. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that we had that were more for Mike, but that's kind of the general approach there's going to be to the answers, I have to say. We sent these questions to Mike beforehand, but when we sort of talked generally, it became clear that it's not, because of the approach he's taking, what the current priority is, it's not really something that you can answer point by point. So I'm going to kind of translate them a little bit and maybe bunch some of them together. So Dan on Twitter asked us about when can fans expect to see a 1 to 5 year plan for the club. So I think, as I say, Mike is getting through the door. He's getting his head around how everything is working, and I think he just wants to understand things. He doesn't want to just rip everything up from the start, because there are different solutions to different problems. And I think that a model that worked in one place is not necessarily the model that you can just assume will be dropped into a different club situation. Obviously, he has 2 other clubs. He has Antequera in Spain and St. Joseph's in Gibraltar, and they will be in different situations to Cheltenham. Burnley was in a different situation. So I think he just wants to understand the lay of the land and get working in that way. So there was a question also about, who is this from? So this was about how Mike Garlick intends to distribute his investment. What's the intended balance between boosting the transfer and wage budget on one hand and the ground and infrastructure developments and increasing commercial opportunities on the other? I think, again, the immediate priority is EFL status, and everything that we can do needs to be built up from that. If we go down to the National League, it's so much more difficult to get back up than it was. I'm not saying it was easy. Gary Johnson did a great job managing then. I just think there's so much more money in that league now, and there's teams that, as I think Dave Beesley said when we were on the Robins report this week, there are teams putting together a squad of essentially League One players, so they can shoot up if they can get out of the National League straight up through League Two. So we just need to stay in the league we're in this season and then build from that foundation. Michael on Twitter asked us about fixing the PA system. Now, we have raised this with Mike Garlick. He, as I say, is quite calm and considered. He's in listening mode. And I think, these things are kind of being listed, and then he's going to look at what the approach could be to fix these things. So I hope that will get addressed, because I agree that has been an issue for a long time. So Gab Sutton asked us about whether we have the impression that Mike Garlick is going to be front-footed in addressing some of the internal question marks, or take a bit of time to take stock. I mean, I think I've answered that really. I think he's taking stock. That's not a kind of lack of proactivity in any way. That is understanding what the situation is, and then things are going to be tackled. So this is from Stuart on Twitter, asking, can the trust and the trust board member please urge the new owner and chairman to send out comms to explain what is going on behind the scenes at the club? Why is the manager washing the kit? I think we dealt with the washing the kit in the previous bit. We have talked about communications. And that's just because we want Mike to understand, well, we want the communications to be better, obviously, but we also want him to understand how the fans are feeling at the moment, and why there's this kind of gap, a vacuum that can get filled by fairly small comments or kind of innuendos that then just grow and lead to a sense of kind of malaise and apathy, which I think is not helpful. This is a new project, and we want people to be excited about it. So I really hope we will see an improvement on that side of things. There was another one about fans' frustrations about the leadership of the club being conveyed to Mike and Alison, and whether we're looking at a CEO to oversee things. So Mike was keeping his cards pretty close to his chest. As I say, he's in listening mode at the moment, and I really respect that. I think you've got to understand what you're dealing with. He's seen the accounts, he's seen things on paper, he's visited the ground at the training ground before he bought the club. But that's not how you get a comprehensive understanding of how everything works. I think he wants to hear and he wants to understand everything. So he's very open to collaborating with the trust and working with the trust to develop our club. And I'm sure that extends to fans as a whole. I think when the shadow board starts, that's going to be a very useful platform for him to take information from. So I hope he'll be making the use of that as well. So the next question, again, this is Kevin on Twitter. Thank you. This is about the communications. We've talked to him about that. We've talked to the club otherwise about that. The Robins Trust appointed director, Dave Beesley, has spoken to the board about that. we had a commitment from last summer saying that comms would improve then, and I think over the year they haven't. So I just really hope that we talked about this in the earlier piece. It's a kind of time and manpower issue, person power issue. I think hopefully that's going to be addressed as soon as possible, because it's one of those things that everyone knows about, and I think we can't really get our heads around why it continues to be this way. Anyhow. And Dan Hart asked a question, which we dealt with a bit earlier, but I think it's good to hop on this after we've spoken to Mike Garlick. So he says, I and many others pay a voluntary amount of money to be a trust member. The purpose of this previously was to increase trust shareholding at the club. Now we have a single major shareholder has that opportunity reduced. And if so, what will the money be used for? Now, we asked Mike about this. In the summer, there were other potential owners who met with us, and they made it very clear that they would want 100% of the club. And if they couldn't get our shares immediately, they would aggressively buy shares and get equity in the club to do a squeeze out, as it's called. There's a threshold, and once they got to that, they could force us to sell our shares to them. So we asked Mike about how he felt about the trust continuing to be a co-owner and being able to continue to buy shares and maintain our stake. And he's very happy with that. He seemed completely open to this, and that he wants to work with the trust. So we think it's a fantastic opportunity for supporters to continue to own a chunk of our club and to investigate the ways in which we can bring in the funding for some big projects, either to support what Mike is doing or to sort of take a bit for ourselves to work on it and do that as a community. So this is a hypothetical, but for example, Mike and the club want to work on the main stand and do that. The trust could take over doing the home end. That's an ambitious project. We'd have to look at bonds or commercial partners, things to do that, but that would be an amazing thing to do, and for us to help just push that project forward and to have that stake in our club, which is what the trust really is about. It's your club, and we literally own a chunk of it. It's our business, and it's in all of our interests that it's successful, and it provides the match day experience, and it's a place that you want to go to and hang out. It's our footballing home. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to kick off on that. I think that is the end of the questions that were asked. So thank you very much to everyone for sending them in. Thank you to Mike for answering and having a chat with us about that as well. We're going to have regular conversations with him, regular contact, and work as a sort of ownership group, I think, to just push our club forward. We're not going to be little old Cheltenham anymore. So yeah, it's a bright future. Thank you for the questions. If any more come in, we will do another Ask Us Anything. It would be good to be able to do this just as a kind of reasonably regular thing, just to answer people's questions and let people know what's going on, rather than it seeming reactive to comments or disagreements that are going on. Anyway, if you're not a member of the trust already, this is an amazing time to join us, because there are some really good things we can be involved in, and we want to keep up with Mike Garlick, keep that stake, keep our ownership of it, your ownership of it. So if you go to robinstrust.org/join, it's only £10 a year to be a member. All the members are equal, one member, one vote. Or if you'd like to support us a bit more and enable us to put a bit more money into the club, you can be the investor tier, which is £5 a month minimum. It can be more for the generous folks that can give more. I know it's difficult for everyone, cost of living, but I think £10 a year represents really good value to own your football club. Thanks again. I hope this is useful. Let us know if you have any feedback. I'm sure you will. Take care.